Rock and roll was built on rebellion, excess, and the rejection of authority. Yet hiding in plain sight, behind the stadium lights and screaming crowds, were bands whose faith ran deeper than anyone suspected. These are 10 bands you didn't know were secretly religious. Hit that notification bell so the algorithm delivers this channel straight to your feed every single time we post. Number 10. Slayer. 3 decades of pentagrams, inverted crosses, and lyrics about the collapse of organized religion. Yet the man at the center of it all was regularly attending Sunday Mass. Tom Araya, bassist and vocalist of one of the most feared bands in thrash metal history, has been a practicing Catholic his entire life. The band formed in Huntington Park, California in 1981 and built a career on imagery so extreme that Tipper Gore's Parents Music Resource Center made them a primary target when it formed in 1985. While they shared stages with Megadeth and Anthrax for years, few realized Araya maintained a quiet spiritual life off the road. In multiple interviews, Araya explained that he views the band's lyrics the same way an actor views a horror film script, as a performance, rather than a confession of personal belief. He described raising his children in the Catholic Church while simultaneously recording albums called Rain in Blood and God Hates Us All. His bandmate Kerry King is a committed atheist, making Slayer a rare instance where the frontman screaming blasphemous lyrics is the only member who actually believes in a higher power. Number 9. Bad Brains.
Lift up your head, are you gay?
Few moments in punk history are as jarring as discovering that the fastest, most ferocious hardcore band in America was actually a group of deeply devout Rastafarian believers. Formed in Washington, D.C. in 1977, Bad Brains pioneered a sound so aggressive that most clubs refused to book them, yet every note they played was a religious offering. Their 1982 debut cassette release on ROIR Records opened with reggae passages that confused fans who only knew their blistering punk side. But to the band, both styles were sacred expressions of divine energy. The intersection of their faith and music led to significant controversy in the early 1980s, particularly during a stay in Austin, Texas, where HR made homophobic statements rooted in their religious doctrine, causing a rift in the punk scene that lasted for years. Their 2012 documentary, Bad Brains, a band in D.C., captures the tension between their musical genius and the rigid beliefs that repeatedly cost them opportunities. Bands like Red Hot Chili Peppers and Fishbone cited them as a foundation, often without realizing the group viewed their rehearsals as literal acts of worship. Number 8. The Ramones. Leather jackets, 3 chords, and a cartoon image once hid more complexity than any casual observer of the 1970s New York punk scene realized. C.J. Ramone, who joined the group in 1989, has spoken openly about his devout Catholic faith and the traditional path he nearly took away from rock music entirely. While the band's original members were known for hedonism, C.J. described his faith as the stabilizing force that kept him grounded during the chaos of international touring. Johnny Ramone was also a traditionalist whose rigid personal code and discipline mirrored a religious devotion more than typical rock stardom. Johnny's posthumously published autobiography, Commando, released in 2012, reveals a man who structured his life around strict rules that bordered on the monastic. CJ elaborated on his own spiritual journey in a 2014 interview, noting that the discipline of his religious upbringing never left him, even while performing the band's trademark anthems. The Misfits and the Buzzcocks acknowledged the Ramones as their blueprint, never suspecting the theological weight and personal discipline running beneath those matching leather jackets.
Why can't I stop and tell myself I'm wrong?
Number 7. Evanescence. In 2003, shortly after their mainstream breakthrough, albums by this gothic rock group were physically pulled from the shelves of Christian bookstores across America. Evanescence had been signed to Wind Up Records and initially marketed through religious distribution channels, with their debut album Fallen reaching stores like Lifeway Christian Resources before their global explosion. Amy Lee and co-founder Ben Moody had written songs rooted in spiritual struggle and grief, and many religious retailers embraced them as a faith-friendly alternative to secular metal. This created a surreal moment in music retail where a mainstream chart topper was suddenly unwelcome in religious circles. The relationship ended abruptly in April 2003 when a band member used profanity in an Entertainment Weekly interview, a deliberate signal that they refused to be categorized as a Christian act. Lee has since described her spiritual views as deeply personal, telling interviewers that songs like Bring Me to Life were never intended to be evangelical tools. Fallen eventually sold over 15 million copies worldwide, proving that the band didn't need the support of the niche market they had originally been placed in. Number 6. Black Sabbath. The band that invented heavy metal spent decades being accused of Satanism and investigated by churches for their dark lyrical themes. Yet buried on their 1971 album Master of Reality is a song called After Forever that reads like a direct theological defense of belief in God. Written by bassist Geezer Butler, a lifelong Catholic, the lyrics explicitly challenge atheism and ask listeners whether they are simply afraid to admit their faith to their peers. It remains one of the most openly pro-religious songs ever recorded by a band that was simultaneously being picketed by religious groups. Butler has confirmed in multiple interviews that the band's dark imagery was always a theatrical provocation borrowed from horror cinema rather than a reflection of personal belief. Tony Iommi, the band's guitarist, lost the tips of his fingers in a factory accident at 17 and has credited a mix of faith and fate with his recovery and signature sound. Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple inherited their volume, but they never quite grasped the spiritual contradiction at the heart of Black Sabbath. Before we continue, which entry on this list shocked you the most so far? Were you a fan of any of these bands growing up, completely unaware of their faith? Drop a comment below and let us know what city or country you're watching from. Number 5. Joy Division.
The assassins all grouped and four lines dancing on the floor.
The most celebrated post-punk band in history built its aesthetic around cold isolation and industrial despair, yet a foundation of repressed religious guilt ran through its music. Lead singer Ian Curtis grew up as a church chorister and vestry boy in Macclesfield, England, absorbing the rituals and moral weight of Anglican Christianity at a formative age. Bassist Peter Hook's 2012 memoir, Unknown Pleasures Inside Joy Division, traces how that early religious immersion shaped the band's obsession with shame and judgment. Though their sound was bleak, the framework of their songs often mirrored the theological struggles Curtis experienced as a youth. Curtis never wrote explicitly religious lyrics, but the themes of sin and unreachable grace saturate tracks like Disorder and the Eternal in ways that become obvious with historical context. His personal struggles with epilepsy and depression were frequently filtered through a psyche shaped by years of church attendance and traditional English Protestant suffering. Groups like The Cure and Interpol adopted the band's sonic blueprint without ever fully accounting for the spiritual weight woven into the original recordings. Number 4. The Killers. Over 28 million albums sold worldwide, and a series of chart-topping hits haven't changed the fact that this band's frontman is a high-profile member of the Mormon Church. Brandon Flowers was raised in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints from childhood, and his membership has remained a central part of his life throughout his career. While Mr. Brightside became the anthem for a generation's nightlife, Flowers maintained a strict lifestyle of no alcohol and no drugs on tour. He often sought out local congregations to attend services while traveling between major stadium shows and international festivals. In 2011, Flowers appeared in an official I'm a Mormon video campaign, which genuinely surprised a substantial portion of the band's secular fanbase. He has often spoken about the tension between his religious identity and the rock and roll world his band inhabits, viewing it as a balance he must constantly navigate. Though his bandmates do not share his specific faith, Flowers' spiritual framework continues to influence his songwriting and his approach to global stardom.
Sometimes you close your eyes and see the place where you used to be.
Number 3. Kings of Leon. Before these brothers were selling out arenas, they were children riding through the American South in a van, attending Pentecostal tent revivals. Caleb, Nathan, and Jared Followill are the sons of a traveling Pentecostal minister who moved the family constantly through the Bible Belt throughout the 1980s and early 1990s. Their childhood was largely devoid of secular music and television, replaced by near-total immersion in evangelical Christian culture. When they finally transitioned into rock music, they brought the fire and brimstone intensity of their father's preaching into their vocal performances and stage presence. Their 2011 documentary, Talihina Sky, The Story of Kings of Leon, captures the extraordinary transition from church tents to the cover of Rolling Stone. Their early albums, Youth and Young Manhood and Aha Shake Heartbreak, are filled with Southern Gothic imagery and religious allegories drawn directly from their upbringing. The band never marketed themselves as a religious act, and the swagger of their music often obscured the Pentecostal foundation beneath the surface. It was only with their 2008 release Only by the Night that they fully pivoted toward a mainstream sound. Number 2. Earth, Wind & Fire. Over 90 million records sold worldwide, and a Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award defined this band. But their entire catalog was actually a meticulously constructed spiritual document. Maurice White founded the group in Los Angeles in 1969 after relocating from Chicago, with a purpose that extended far beyond simple entertainment. He was a devoted student of Egyptology and various spiritual traditions, believing that music could be a vessel for universal consciousness. Every album cover and stage costume was designed to carry a specific spiritual message to an audience that largely perceived them as a funk and soul powerhouse. White's autobiography, published in September 2016, confirmed that the band's name and symbolism were deliberate cosmological statements. He described his interest in astrology and ancient wisdom as the driving force behind hits like Shining Star and September, which he viewed as vehicles for spiritual elevation. Co-lead vocalist Philip Bailey is an openly committed Christian who has recorded multiple gospel albums, adding another layer of faith to the organization's history. While contemporaries like Parliament and Funkadelic explored space-age themes, Earth, Wind & Fire remained focused on a synthesis of spiritual unity.
You didn't run, you didn't hide, you knew I'd want to hold you.
Number 1. U2. In the early 1980s, 3 members of what would become the biggest band in the world nearly walked away from the music industry forever. Bono, The Edge, and Larry Mullen Jr. were members of a charismatic Christian fellowship in Dublin called the Shalom Fellowship that viewed rock music as fundamentally incompatible with a life of faith. The 3 men spent months wrestling with the decision, nearly dissolving the group before concluding that their music could serve their values rather than contradict them. This period of intense spiritual searching coincided with the recording of their album October, which remains one of their most overtly religious works. The band's 2006 biography, U2 by U2, documents this crisis with unusual candor, explaining how their faith shaped their early sound and social activism. While bassist Adam Clayton did not share their religious convictions, the band's internal dynamic was defined by a shared sense of spiritual purpose. By the time the Joshua Tree made them global superstars in 1987, their faith was so deeply woven into their anthems that most listeners accepted it as part of the band's identity.